Welcome to the Yards. We're here to kick it around about the New York Football Jets. And Barry, I have just one question.
Well,
What?
you get one answer.
Yeah, that's all I want to hear too. What does the record have to be by the midpoint for you to attend a game in person this year?
All right, so I have a romantic image. It's a cool October night, maybe a Monday night game or something. I don't think it's more the record, Nikki, because we could be 5-3 and I could be miserable. If we're winning games 10-7, I'm not in. If we're losing games 30-5, it's a weird score, I'm in. I can't. I have no interest in being 4-2 and we are averaging 13 points a game. That's my nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, I like the image, and it might be romantic to some, but I could see it. It being a Monday night game, I don't know if we're gonna get too many of those this year.
We don't
But
deserve it.
yeah, I don't want to make America stay up for that.
We should
Yeah, I
just
mean,
Thursday nights. That should be our night. Like how the Cowboys and the Lions get Thanksgiving,
that's
we
so
get
true. Instead
Thursday.
of holidays, we're just designated to just the shitty
Random,
Thursday
yeah,
game.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is true. I mean, it's a great place to start, right? It's not. I'm not as results based this year, and just what the record is going to be arbitrary. I think it's definitely a vibe season. Like, do we feel like they actually know what they're doing?
All
They
right, so
meaning Glenn and company.
I agree with that. Agree with that. Let me ask you a question. Would you rather go 3-14, but somehow we feel good about Glenn, or lose in the last weekend of the season in a tight game, but it's just kind of fields rushing. We're not explosive. We're playing football like it's 1984. That's my nightmare. There's a reason the Sixers tanked. Not because they kept losing and going, winning 25 games a year. It's because they kept just making the playoffs or going 7-10, 8-9 is my nightmare. So what would you rather do?
Yeah, just good enough to not get better is the nightmare. I see your point. I do find it hard to believe we could be 3-14 and feel good about Glenn, but I think your point stands. Whatever that arbitrary record number is, the first one, the former, is the answer. The most important thing to me, because the franchise is telling us what they think, that they're putting this all on the coach. GM second, coach first. So to me, I'm much more interested in us feeling coming away somehow, whatever the record is, with Glenn not only cared, not only did we move away from the disinterestedness of that last regime, forward thinking. There were elements of surprise. There were elements that we punched a team in the mouth. Not only did we
Yeah.
just win a game that we shouldn't have won, we dominated a game that we shouldn't have won. Or we came back and made a game cleaner than it maybe should have been. And that, I think, is that's what I want. So, finding our way, kind of a Tomlin esque, no shots at Pittsburgh towards the end
Shots at
of
Pittsburgh.
the season. Yeah, shots at the mediocrity. It
Yeah.
should be more like the Jets.
Yeah.
Um,
But we're not even good at being bad. That's
and
the
that's
thing.
the thing.
We're
Yeah,
bad at. We're just bad at it. We are now in quarterback hell, and I know you might be in quarterback heaven because your boy
it's my
Justin.
guy,
But
Justin.
I think we're in hell, and we have to get out of hell. And give me your take on Justin. Give me the tight 30 on Justin Fields and how you feel as a Jets fan with him coming in.
The thing about Fields is, as much as I'm into his traits, I'm excited by a lot of aspects. The Pittsburgh thing is really scary. Anything that happened in Chicago is not something I'm interested in really discussing. He showed all
Agreed.
the tools. That place was a nightmare. I think we're in agreement that them benching him, I believe he was 5-2 in that Raiders game, or it was the Colts game, but I know it was a game that they won, and he was okay. And he left some throws on the field, and that was kind of the book on him. It wasn't so much what he was doing wrong, but what he wasn't doing right. And I trust Tomlin. I know it's very cool right now to attack him and his inability to get over the hump lately, and I think there's some validity to that. But I trust him, and him saying, I want to go with 35-year-old Russ instead of the upside of Fields. And I know they wanted to re-sign him, and I think if they really wanted to, they would have. It scares me. It does. But the guy's young enough. He's tough enough. He's got the traits. I don't view it as quarterback hell, and I'll put it that way. I view it as
Oh, we
quarterback
are.
I think it's quarterback purgatory, which in some ways could be worse. But
You
I
are
think,
a wise man. We're in Dante's version of hell.
yeah,
And we are maybe in the eighth layer, maybe not the ninth layer, but
yeah.
we're pretty close. We're with the other.
Well, we can get out of it though, and that's the thing. If you're looking from a price tag
Agreed.
standpoint, you can't look the market. That's the sticker price is scary, but you have to do a comparative sticker price, right? And it's not as bad.
Oh, the sticker price
And
doesn't bother me. Look. Here's the thing about Fields, and this is the irony of the NFL, right? We could have had Baker Mayfield for $1 million contract. He's bouncing around the league. He goes to the Rams. He has the pedigree. He has the moxie. He's got the arm. He's got the athleticism. There's something wrong with him because, again, I don't care about Chicago. That's the kind of path I'd like to go down. A dysfunctional team can't manage a quarterback. Let's take a shot with the pedigree. But I can't get over Pittsburgh. There's no rational reason you can go to Russ Wilson um, and to try to save your season. I still I don't know what the answer is about why he did that, but to kind of foreshadow our next topic, we're like the hospital here. Like all of our signings are typical Jets nonsense. We can fix them, and I'm worried beyond worry. This is the Jets somehow for not making the. My daughter's now 15 and she's never seen a Jets playoff game. Um, 15 years of just Jets nonsense. We're smarter than everybody else. We're going to do this thing. So all the guys, I mean, there's not a single guy that we signed that wasn't our own who even Sherwood maybe we may overpaid for that. What are your comments about our free agent signings? These are guys, there's not a good player out there. Maybe there's a guy with some potential, but these are all cast-offs.
yeah, just to close the loop on Fields before I get to the free agents, the one thing I will say is Arthur Smith, your mileage may vary there. I think that is a hope, is that maybe he wasn't maybe the man for the job, and I'm not sold on him. I know a lot of people like him as an OC, but that's one hope that I have is that maybe just the Justin thing just didn't work because of that. And then the second thing is
Because of what? Because of what?
because of
He's
Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith just wanted
is
to do a
terrible.
very specific thing, and he's bad. That's the hope. Arthur Smith's not a good coach, and his inability to maximize Fields and to get him on the run and to do what most people have to do with quarterbacks who have a 12th best quarterback in the league ceiling, non-elite. Maybe he just wasn't the right guy to
So
maximize
Ryan
Fields.
Tannehill and the success he had in Tennessee before going to Atlanta and then Pitt, that didn't matter to you?
Don't bring logic into this argument. Like
Yeah,
I said, this is a
exactly.
vibe season. But
Yeah,
no, and then the other thing, real quick, before free agency is, Tomlin has become kind of a Bobby Saleh on steroids, the good version of Bobby Saleh of
I agree.
I'm gonna win the Super Bowl with my defense.
I agree.
Cameron Hayward's gonna win the Super Bowl. I just want a guy like Russ, and I'm hoping I can stop with the Russ Cook, and I'm hoping that I can get Russ into this
Maybe.
more of a late stage
It's
Breeze kind of thought, and I'm
it's the
gonna
most look. As long as the Jets open up the season, open up and they just unleash Fields. Maybe he's a great tank quarterback. Just let the guy throw. He's seen it with Goff. You look at a guy like Goff, who they basically got as a gift and top of taking a first round pick,
exactly.
and they turn him into a functional quarterback. Maybe he can't win a Super Bowl. So yeah, sure, can we do that? But they unleash Goff. Like you read all the articles, it's about don't worry about throwing an interception. Don't worry about if that version of Fields exists and they really let him go. Okay, I'm in. That's the only version I want though.
And that's the thing, and that's I think a great place to end there. Where for that aspect of it, where it is, you need to unleash Fields, and you need to get the version of Fields that is feast or famine. It needs to be we're tanking because he's terrible,
Fine.
or we're going again because he showed so many traits because we had him throw it 40 times sometimes, and we had him run the ball 20 times, and he stayed healthy and he was
Yeah.
tough. And we won 7 games, and they were 7 quality wins.
Yeah.
To the free agency class, and I want to hear your thoughts on it too.
Hmm.
I like a lot of the signings in terms of the theory behind them. I like the Stevens and Cisco signings of slightly overpaying for these players who have
Slightly
bad
overpaying.
years.
36 million for Stevens.
Again, I mean, you have to go with the market. I mean, overpaying. I mean, everyone who wasn't overpaid, but they're young, they are athletic,
Agreed.
and they've
Agreed.
had success before. And there wasn't Mickey Mouse success. Cisco has had sustained success over a course of a season. Stevens, 2 good seasons. And I almost like that they had this bottomed out year because it's really the one or the other. They gave up or the coaches gave up on them, and they need to change the scenery, or they're going to be bad. It fits that tank element that I want in this first year of this new regime. Again, the new regime that we haven't had since 2015, a
Yeah.
clean GM coach. It's been 10 years. We always feel like we've been rebuilding, but it's been a lot of patchwork. And I like that in this first year, they've signed some guys along with Fields who are like, this is either going to work or it's not. There's not going to be much
Okay.
ambiguity. It's going to be this Cisco worked or he didn't. I mean,
I'm less worried about Cisco because Cisco's going to be, I don't know, he's going to be fine probably. It's Stevens who I think he's going to get thrown at. I mean, at a level we haven't seen a lot before. And they signed Stevens for $36 million. And and this is the problem. Man, DJ got the hell out of there. He wanted to get the hell out of there. And what he signed for $14 million a year, $16 million. There's only a $2 million difference.
I would be really interested to know what did Glenn and company did they want Reed, because I think he wanted out anyway, so
I
we'll
think he
never
was
actually
out.
know who broke up with who. But would they have wanted him? Would they have made a pass at him? Was it about we want him at the right price, or is he just too tiny? Like, I don't know. I mean, one of my favorite Jets of the last 10 years.
He's unimpeachable. The guy's just a hard nosed player. A lot of that's Bobby though. Bobby's the strategy was dated and having defensive pass rush that we got no pass rush with great quarterbacks that you give any cornerback too much time, he's not going to be able to cover anybody. We had no pass rush last year, and I don't
the
see
Jermaine injury was just brutal. I remember you clocked it. We were watching the Tennessee game together, and it was like it felt different than the first two. It felt different than the Niners, where it's like this is kind of changing.
Yeah, well, the whole team
went the other way.
Well, I don't want to get into it, but of all the moves from last year, which to be honest, didn't have too many problems. The one that still makes no sense to me, and maybe you can explain it to me, is why they just let JFM walk for whatever it was he signed for $4 million. That the Jets season last year. Do you know how many one-loss games they had? One score loss games they had.
It felt like at least 4.
It was 7.
Oh,
7.
Boy.
All right, so we got to do this. I got to do this exercise.
It didn't feel like 7, I will say.
All right, so I'm going to go down all the bad losses, and then you're going to. These are games that we could have won. Okay. The Broncos in the rain.
Absolutely.
Could have won 10-9. Should have won that. The Vikings pick 6 in London that got Bobby fired.
Yeah, I don't know. The Vikings
23-17. Just all right. So we'll say 1-1.
Honestly, I don't think they should have won that.
You're an honest man. We lose by the Bills by 3. To the Bills by 3.
I remember I was in attendance to that game. That game felt the entire time like the Jets were going to win. It did feel that way.
The nonsense in New England when they had some safety who they blitzed, who I've never even heard of. They got him off the street, I think, and he just jumped at the wrong arm. And if he knocks that pass down, the game's over. So we lose that by a point.
That was the worst loss of the year, right? I mean, it was just
not yet.
I would agree, but go ahead, yeah.
So then we lose the Colts disaster by a point after dominating that game.
That was the game where Rodgers felt like they needed to score 30 points there.
Yeah,
I remember that.
The Seahawks disaster, which I still don't know how they lost that game. The Dolphins disaster, which I don't know how that was probably the worst loss of the year. But at that point,
I was just so out at that point that I wanted them to lose. So
and then the Rams, the Rams coming late in the year. It was they wound up losing by 10. It wasn't one score, but it was close. And that this team isn't. I guess my point is there's a double-edged sword here. The team isn't as bad as we were in a playoff team, but we weren't 5-12. We just weren't. That's not a 5-12 team. Was it Aaron, who you like to think it was because you don't like Aaron? You don't like critical thinkers. And
people who I don't like people who know too much. I like to stay in the dark.
And I think I think a lot of it was Bobby. And I think a lot of it was Ulbrich was overmatched. I think the defense was not nearly as good as they thought it was, but that team could have easily been, upside. That team is 9 or 8-8 going into the last week, or fighting for a playoff. So is the roster that bad?
No, it's a 7-10 roster, and that's the thing. If they don't fire Bobby,
but is it a 7? Oh, okay. So going forward this year,
it's 7-10, and we're in a way worse spot. So I'm thankful that they did that, because those 2 extra wins mean nothing to me. You still should have fired Bob at the end, and it might have been nice in the moment to win a couple of those games, and feel a little bit more competent. But who knows what might have happened? What kind of tomfoolery might have went on? I mean, Aaron might still be the quarterback. I would
Again,
hope so, but
I think Aaron should be the quarterback. I do. I
I
still
just
think
don't. I just don't see how. I think that is your. You were so tired of the bad seasons and the Not we're not going to make the playoff seasons, but even the best case scenario of Aaron one more year was not worth dealing with this again. Even if they go 10-7, which by far was being very generous for their ceiling,
Yeah,
it's
of
just
course.
not. It's not a. It's not worth it. It's not worth being
Worth
able to go
what? Having a good quarterback? What's
He
that?
wasn't. He wasn't good last year.
Was he or was he not the best Jets quarterback of the past 20 years?
That has nothing to do with
Was he the best? That's my point. He was the best Jets quarterback of the past 20 years, outside of
100%.
Favre, before he got hurt.
100. Well, Trubisky was also the best Bears quarterback at the time.
No,
And
Rex, come on, no. How dare you?
Rex Grossman,
No, what's his name?
Jim McMahon,
No, he was fine.
Harbaugh,
Cutler was fine.
I mean, come on.
There's just been so much dysfunction, and to play that quarterback at that. Now, again, I have all sorts of problems with Aaron on the field. Way too conservative. He played through injuries that if he takes off 2 weeks with Tyrod, they probably win a game. But the thing about Aaron that I can't get over, maybe you can answer this, is what's going on with Garrett Wilson. Why does he not throw? I mean, everyone's kind of glancing over this. Oh, he just doesn't love. But why didn't he throw the ball to Garrett Wilson? Why do we think Garrett is worth $30 million and is a superstar when Aaron, to his credit, hasn't destroyed him in the media, but he clearly didn't think he was doing something right. And what was he doing wrong? What was the issue?
And again, I'm not even going to bash Aaron here as much as I'm going to say. I think to a guy like Aaron, who's accomplished as much as he had in that league, it's not about what's right. It's about what's his. And I think little intricacies of cutting here instead of here, and the attitude in which he is not successfully running the routes he wants, or the attitude in which he's not successfully getting to the spot that he wants him at. I don't think Garrett played ball the way that he was in that first offseason. I think that he maybe was a little bit tired of the Aaron thing. And I don't think it was, that dramatic. But I think it was just a little. I just think they were a little.
He was the number
I don't
two
think it was
receiver
that
last
big of
year.
a deal.
I think it's a huge deal. Say what you will about Aaron. The guy's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Mentally, he's up there as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And he stopped throwing Garrett the ball. He stopped targeting him. Just want to know
Traded
why.
for his buddy, and he just wanted to get the record.
Yeah, but is he that? Is he that? Is he that? Especially early in the season when the season was still alive. Maybe you could tell me in Miami, the last couple of games, he's trying to do stuff for the 500 touchdown, etc. But there's something wrong with Garrett Wilson. There is.
There's nothing wrong with him. I mean, it just
he just didn't.
He's not an X receiver because I think he's too small, and because I think that just he doesn't have the 10 years of experience that Devontae has with running the routes or ideas. That.
So he's not on your radar. So Garrett Wilson's not on your radar as a maybe he's not.
Garrett Wilson is a top. I'll be conservative here. He's a top 15 wide receiver asset in the league. And
did you say asset or just the
asset?
Okay.
Top 15 wide receiver asset in the league. If you take,
I'd have to look at that, but that sounds about right.
And I think that it's something that I can't tell you how many times I don't think he's going to make a play, and he does.
Mm-hmm.
Last year was disappointing, but I'm at a place where Garrett Wilson is one of the few things that I'm not worried about. If I was expecting him to be a Ja'Marr Chase, then I would be worried. If I had stock in him,
he's not Ja'Marr Chase
winning Offensive Player of the Year. It's not his profile. It never was.
Yeah.
I think you remember, I wasn't the biggest Garrett Wilson fan in the draft because to me, at 10, he felt a little rich. I already feel like I was wrong. I feel like he's a top 10 wide receiver talent, and I think that
who's his comp?
Be a very good receiver.
Who's his comp? Who at his best? Who's his comp? Who's Garrett Wilson?
Non-psychotic Stephon Diggs. Head on straight Stephon Diggs.
I think he's actually head on straight Steve Smith. They're not as physical a player.
I don't know if he has that physicality. No,
he doesn't have that physicality, but he's not. Stephon could go strong. Garrett's not. I just
games when Mike White was really heating up.
Yeah.
Rest in peace to the legend. He's some big boy stuff in those games, and it
Oh,
wasn't perfect, but like, yeah, man. I mean,
I think he's a number one. I mean, I think he's a number one, and I don't not even sure. I think one of the big, and I think the Jets get this. One of the biggest things that you can do incorrectly in today's NFL is try to have too many receivers. You don't need them. You need a number one. There's not a lot of legit number one receivers in the NFL. I think Garrett's, just around 12 to 15, like you said. He's a number one receiver. You can run an offense through him, and
absolutely.
you don't need Devontae Adams. It's actually overkill. You don't need to go out and get. There's no way. Maybe it's mark this that I think the Bengals can win with paying Jamar Chase and T Higgins. I just don't think you can do it in today's
I think
NFL.
you can. You're just putting yourself in a box of you have to draft really well. You've got to hit. You've got to hit
Sure.
on that guard in the fourth round.
Sure.
You can do it. I don't think I would have done it. I agree with you. Like when you have a guy like Garrett Wilson, this is what frustrates me about the Jets. Back to the free agency of it all to close that loop. It's I want a KJ Osborne. I want a DJ Chark.
Yeah.
I want a Matt Collins. I want these guys who are true pros. And I feel like a lot of these teams, it's not just the Jets here, thankfully, make these mistakes of they go with your plan of you only need one top 15, top 18 asset at receiver. You only need one budding star, budding X, budding number one, whatever you want to call it. But then they'll get Alan Lazard. They'll get these guys, Xavier.
You don't like
guys
Josh?
Don't.
I don't want to see the X experiment needs to go away.
We just stop giving nicknames to people who aren't good. That's one of my big things.
I like Josh Reynolds. I like the Josh Reynolds signing, and I like the Tyler Johnson signing.
Reynolds is the almost platonic version of what I'm talking about. Josh Reynolds is a pro. He runs the offense. I need 2 or 3 of those guys. Go with Garrett Wilson and Xavier Gibson. Garrett Wilson and KJ Osborne.
Yeah, I agree.
Now you're talking.
But why don't the Jets do that? Why don't they ever do that? They never signed
it's one of my biggest pet peeves.
They never signed the $6 million guy. Never. They just never do it.
I was rather Robert Woods. I was begging for it, and maybe it's a little bit too late now.
Did your boy sign? Tyler?
Which one?
Tyler.
Lockett's, he's selling houses right now, so he's
a guy, just a pro. I think there's real value in aged wide receivers to be that sort of third option in the offense.
Yes.
And
a real guy, a real NFL receiver.
Just in the right spot. Just, it's our boy Cotchery, our boy, I can't think of his name now. He's back on Washington. Love
Jameson.
Yeah, Crowder. Just be in the right spot. If the quarterback should. Nah, he was too talented. He was just a guy who's in the right spot, makes a play, says, "Oh my God, that guy ran for a first down." Yeah. I don't know. So I'm going to say some names and I just want to grade, just a letter grade on the free agent signing and what you think.
I like this segment. This is good.
All right, so Justin Fields, we've discussed him. Just give me the grade, Professor. B+. Jamie and Sherwood for a big price, but what's your Sherwood take?
A. I think it's an A. It's I don't believe you can overpay for in-house good players. I think that it's a huge thing that's undervalued in the NFL. I think that it's something that when they're good and they're young and you made them who they are, that's what makes people sign with you. That's what builds a culture. People talk about those things that are kind of like empty words. I think that that's real. I think that it says something to everybody that you will be rewarded.
Was it Sherwood and our boy Quincy's fault that we couldn't stop the run? Was it philosophy? Are they too small? Are you worried about that? Is there a problem with the Jets linebacking that we're never be able to stop the run?
Could we have had parallel problems there where there is an issue with Quincy, more so probably than Sherwood? Yes, but I will refuse to talk about it until we address, which I think we will, the worst defensive tackle situation, the second defensive tackle situation.
It's pretty amazing that I think you could have done better. Just say, Nick, lay there, and when someone runs over you, try to trip them.
I typically would not entertain such nonsense, and most people of good faith wouldn't. There are times when Solomon Thomas and Kinlaw doing things where it was like you genuinely just falling down in the fetal position in the right technique would have
just lay here. More. Just lay here. Don't let him pick you up. Just lay here. Make him move around you. All right, back to the grade game. Tyler Johnson, wide receiver.
It's so C minus. It's so.
How dare
I
you?
think you could have done better.
How dare you? Josh Reynolds.
B.
All right, so we got the trifecta of D linemen.
I don't know where my head's at here. I'm going just off of feel.
That's what we do. This is a feel.
Yeah.
We're touchy feely. We're gonna go a bunch of big fatty D linemen, which I think we're both excited about. Any of the three, Cowart, Tufel, or Nandia, that you are excited about, or you think will actually play. So that wouldn't. I would say they did a little bit of, instead of the $6 million I want to spend, or my $5 million players, they did $2 million players. I guess they're warm bodies. I guess that's the idea.
I don't have the all 22 on these guys. I'm not going to presume to be an expert from what I've seen, which is mostly broadcast. But I know
why am I listening to your podcast if you're not an expert?
That's true. Because mostly looks.
Okay.
I think they're NFL defensive tackles, which is a huge step up, and I do think that they're going to address that position in the second or third round.
Yeah, it's a good draft.
First, I doubt it. So I think that.
Well, that's my dream. Yeah. But okay, Chucky Okafor, right tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I know it didn't go great for him, but ideally, with my dream, which I'm sure we'll get to maybe next episode a little bit tonight, of what they do at 7 or in the second round, he's your swing tackle. He's replacing Carter Warren, who I really don't want to see, Max Mitchell, who I really don't want to see. So I'm fine with it. I like it.
Give me a grade.
Oh, God. Doesn't matter. You're the teacher here. B.
Ooh, like
for what it says, if he's a starting right tackle, it's a D.
Yeah, he's a guy that he might, the second day of training camp, if he retires, I'll be like, okay. It's like an incomplete. That's the grade. I'm giving incomplete. If he makes it through training camp without retiring again.
And
Josh Myers.
I like Josh Myers. He was a former, again, NFL center. Going to push Tittman. I doubt that's going to amount to anything. I like Tittman. That's a B minus for me. I think that, center's really important. And
Tittman gets hurt, put him in.
He's a solid backup, so I like it.
Brandon Stevens, you've waxed poetic on him, so let's see.
Yeah, I personally am an A on Stevens because of the philosophy. I love the philosophy of we're going for something here, man.
You know who he is? He is who was our boy? Who was the corner that you loved from Virginia? That was a Jet. And 5th round, he was our guy. And then we just cut him.
Bryce Hall.
Bryce Hall. He's Bryce Hall 2.0. You know that, right? That's who he is.
Taking Bryce Hall in the second round.
Yeah, you would have. You did. You loved your Bryce, and everyone loved. They all Jets fans. He just had no ball skills, and neither does Brandon Stevens. There's unbelievable stats that he can cover guys, but you just throw at him because he won't do anything, and that's what that's.
I love the idea of it's your point about hubris, and when someone's bad, that looks bad.
Yeah,
I'm talking about Aaron Glenn, I'm talking about Muji, but when they're a good GM or a good coach, I like that. We're going to get something out of him here, and I almost like that they paid $36 million. Maybe I'm just excited and optimistic about Glenn, but it's like they see something and they think they're getting in on the ground floor of something that could be really cool. The Quincy contract, it's not the same thing, but it's similar. And it's I enjoy that hubris because you're going to have to put up or shut up anyway, so I'd rather leave
Cisco. Now, the thing about the Cisco is worth the money for a variety, but just the jokes that will, with an interception or a big tackle, it's worth. It's good. That's going to be. We could probably get Cisco. We could probably get Cisco to watch a game with us this year.
Again, restoring the vibes in the toilet bowl that is MetLife. It's jet.
It is a toilet bowl.
It's important. I mean, God, we really need an enema. So I think that having somebody who, and again, on the field too. I almost like that he might be trying to jump around and give him a 70-yard touchdown.
Of course. I'd love to see it.
We've been missing. So I like the ball skills, the kind of the antithesis of Stevens there. He might be too focused on coming down with something. But he's had a lot of good tape. He's had a lot of good tape. If you want to mention the bad, you have to mention the good.
Rashad Weaver.
I remember him out of Pittsburgh. I had lost complete notice of him. I haven't watched him in a couple of years.
He has one purpose. It's the only thing I care about. He has one job. What is his one job? Who does he have to get? No. More important than set the edge. Get Michael Clemens off this team. If I see Michael Clemens again this season.
Is there a guy who wins the
my least favorite Jet?
Approval. Is it him or Lazard?
Oh, I like Lazard 100 times more. Not even close.
Might be on this team. They're almost.
I like. They have to put. I mean, why not? Well, who cares?
They're preparing.
Yeah, because they're kind of doing them. They're doing them a shit. Well, I guess it doesn't matter till the really the post draft. But I think Lazard's on the team. Do you think Lazard's on the team next
Yeah,
year?
I think that they're preparing us for that.
Yeah, why not? Who cares? The guy can block. Again, it's a little scary because there's a version of this that we talked about that Lazard's a great blocker, and we're just going to run Fields and Hall and Allen and Davis, who I don't like. But we're
How
just going to.
dare you?
Come on, you can't be excited about Isaiah Davis.
But you love Braylon, though.
I do love Braylon.
I want to make sure the listeners
I love
are
Braylon.
oriented with that he's not a complete madman.
No, I love Braylon.
Yeah, no, I mean that does go back into the 7 and 9, not that competitive, but wins us out of a draft pick.
You know what they're planning to do right now. Right now, you know what they're planning to do with the offense, right? They're gonna split Brees out.
5 yards
100%.
of dust. Yeah, I mean,
No, they're gonna split them out. They're gonna have two guys in the backfield. They did this a little bit last year and just split Brees as a receiver is by far the second biggest weapon we have on this team, without a doubt. They're going to split him out. He's going to play like some new version of H-back. That's happening right now, unless things drastically change.
I'm not that comfortable with promoting gambling because I don't want people to live the life that we lead. But we both are going to go shoebox money on the over Brees's catches for the year, whatever it is.
Right now, that's what they're doing because look, he's there. They have no offensive real weapons on this team. The guy is great out of the backfield catching the ball. Mismatch mania. You might see them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're going to utilize him. I mean, this is the make or break year for Brees. I feel bad for the guy, but it's like, if it's not at least a good year, you're talking about him not being re-signed.
He was the worst running back I've ever seen last year. I'm not kidding. Terrible last year.
That's pretty good.
He's terrible. I'm not kidding. Does this face look like America? Does this face look like it's joking? There were games I thought he was drunk. There were games he didn't make it past the line of scrimmage. Like I think Aaron got so into his head.
He seemed particularly affected.
That this wasn't in the right. He just looked like a disaster, and that's a guy I love. I thought he was one of the most exciting Jets of all time. But last year he looked absolutely terrible, and Braylon looked so much better. It wasn't even the same conversation.
I remember the Tennessee game. Braylon won that Tennessee game, week 2, right before the Patriot, where the height of the season. I mean, that game was lost. I remember that Tennessee game was lost, and Braylon took over, and they started handing him the rock, and it turned around. I mean, Brees needs to be more decisive. He needs to.
They got to get Brees
fully trusted the knee. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think also they just need to give Brees, a guy like that. You got to give him 20 carries a game, and they just didn't. And I think he was so. With all the hand signals.
And you want Aaron back as the quarterback and do that again.
Well, because I'll go get another running back if I get Aaron back. Because I don't think Brees won't be on the team next year. I mean, in 2026, Brees Hall is not on the Jets. I can't.
It might sound a bit silly to some, but I think it's 60-40. He's not on the team next year.
Yeah, I mean, unless
he needs to have a 1,200-yard season.
Well, he's not good. He's not. Yeah. Okay. All right, so overall, I'd give the your grades a solid C, just fine.
I think they averaged out to a C too.
About a C. This is a very Jets-like offseason, and one of the biggest misnomers about Jets fans and people watching the Jets is thinking that we win the offseason. That's usually not the case. There's a big deal out we signed Le'Veon Bell. That contract actually wasn't even a big deal. It was basically a 2-year deal. Who cares? The stuff with Aaron, that trade was a disaster. But typically, we don't overspend in free agency. We really haven't done that. We don't have a lot of big ticket free agents. The biggest ticket overpay was Mosley, and he worked out fine. He was actually the right kind of idea. But we do these strange off seasons where we get these guys who are just, and we don't coach them up. We just kind of drop them in. On the offensive side, for sure. On the defensive side, some of these guys we've had better coaching over the past decade. But missing from the list, there's no playmakers on this offense, and we're not even trying to get playmakers on the offense, and it's a concern.
Yeah, I think the winning in the offseason is a lot more back to the vibes being one of the keywords of the podcast. It's more about the fact the high that you're in in July versus what ultimately happens to all of us in October, that before Halloween the season's over, is that essentially the happiest time of a Jets fan life is the off season. So you're
Yeah.
winning the off season. It's more so that we as a fan base are feeling good, and that I think is
But
the
are
edge.
we?
I agree with you. There's a little bit of a, I think part of our journey here on the yards for the Jets and the Mets, but for the Jets, Jets purposes here is to kind of right some of the wrongs and reclaim some of the positive aspects of the Jets. And this might not be a huge, win in their favor, but the idea that they're this ridiculous
Yeah,
franchise who
that's
is
unfair.
constantly
Well,
overpaying, to your point,
yeah, that's
constantly overpaying that's not where they're ridiculous necessarily.
yeah.
A lot of their moves have been about inaction. They
Mhm.
haven't gone for it. They haven't actually done the things that, the Sam Darnold idea where it's like, oh, how many times are you going to take a quarterback, the Darnold to Wilson
Mhm.
thing? That was really the first time that happened in succession. And the idea that the Jets
But
could
they
flip the
made
quarterback every year.
they ultimately made the safer move there. They actually
Yes.
made the safer move by let's restart the clocks, let's get rid of Sam. We don't want to overpay for Sam. It's really been since like Neil O'Donnell that they did something really stupid where they overpaid, and you could say that the Aaron Rodgers or even the Brett Favre thing, but I guess the Tebow. But actually, the Tebow thing kind of made sense. I know I'm on an island with that, but I don't know. I think this is the worst franchise in the NFL. Would you rather be a Jets fan or a Browns fan? Actually, I
No,
think
it's a great point. I mean, in the current state, I think I'd much rather be a Jets fan. But I mean, they are one of the worst franchises in the NFL, if not the worst. Your mileage may vary. I'm just saying that, and I think you were saying too, the way in which they're incompetent is not the narrative.
they're
The
always looking
way,
forward. They're always looking forward. It's not they never make that. We haven't traded our first round pick sort of stuff. Oh, we're going to try to get a Jay Cutler and it doesn't work out, or Deshaun Watson. It's never that. It's inaction. It's a great point by you. Um, And it's always, oh, we'll build through the draft, but then we draft terribly. And we've talked about this in the past, but we just don't develop offensive players. Who's the last decent offensive player that we've developed who hasn't just been a superstar, right? Garrett, we couldn't screw Garrett up. It looks like we've screwed Brees up. When's the last time we drafted a guy in the fourth round and he contributed on even in the NFL? It's
yeah,
unbelievable.
Kyle probably the best example, and obviously
Yeah.
all of us Jet fans have a big soft spot for him. But we all know where he ranks in all time receivers. It's not exactly gold jacket level, but yeah, I mean, it's not often. It's not nearly often enough. And I think the real,
It's non-existent.
yeah, the incompetence I think is really with the hiring has been so much bad process, so much they can't get lucky. It's the idea of like you get lucky when you do the right things. When you
Yeah.
get lucky and you make the right decisions along the way, you will get rewarded in the scheme of things at the blackjack table. They're so incompetent with their process that I think that's where
But
they set themselves apart.
can Aaron Glenn come in and change that? Yes or no?
I think that there have, for the first time, I mean, this is a literal thing. He has changed things. People have been fired, and there have been moves made that have not been made in a lot of years. So
Like,
there have things being changed. You got these scouts who have been with the team, these no name positions, and maybe they didn't affect wins and losses. But the point was that an actual change. People who were sitting in the same desks in the same spots at Florham Park for years have either been transitioned out, fired. There is something to that, and I think
well,
that there is a little bit of a breath of fresh air.
let me ask you the tough question. Are the Jets particularly bad at drafting, which I think would be the predominant theory, or are they just completely inept at coaching? And that they're actually draft. Now, my theory would be if you have 10 draft picks, 8 of them are going to be who they are. Maybe 7 of them are going to be who they are. But there's the other 3 that you can coach up and turn into NFL players. And we just haven't had the coaching staff for whatever reason, which is kind of unbelievable. But I guess if you really want to parse it down, do we finally have a coaching staff that we can develop young players, especially on the offensive side of the ball? Or are things going to be different now?
Yes, to answer your question plainly, I think it's more of a coaching issue than a drafting issue. That's not that there hasn't been a drafting issue with the New York Jets, because there has been. They're a lot more common, though. You can compare other franchises. I won't just name them off the top of my head, but there are probably 7 to 8 other franchises that are in the same bucket as the Jets when it comes to drafting. the clip in which they are successful is not as bad as one might think, especially with our buddy Joe Douglas, who I believe should have been fired.
Mhm.
I also believe was not a bad drafter. I agree with a lot of his process. He made some truly unforgivable decisions, especially in the pro market. But in terms of drafting, he was okay. It wasn't an Isdick level of incompetence. I think it lies in coaching, and I think that so much of that is all the coaching decisions that have been made since Rex, even Rex himself.
Yeah.
People knew at the time was limited, and then post Rex, they were bad ideas at the time. These were not Monday morning quarterback decisions. Of Vols, people knew was limited. In Arizona, there were signs. Gase, we don't even have to get into. It's these going in with your eyes wide open about someone being a bad decision and then not being able to develop. I liked the Saleh hire. I think a lot of people did.
Yeah.
But
I think Glenn is what we thought the Saleh hire was. A guy that would motivate the players, would be exciting, would be aggressive, would try to win, and it turned out he was the exact opposite. The guy was played an old-fashioned style football, didn't ever want to take any chances, literally didn't want to score points, and it got so bad that I really believe our defense was so good 2 years ago is because our offense was so bad that they just weren't trying. They didn't want to risk because they knew we couldn't score 6 points.
We don't know how good that defense actually was because they were not tested because people were like, we're just going to keep your famous line. Bobby wanted to win the game 10-9.
Yeah.
And the other teams that played them were very comfortable with the other end of that, which was we'll win 10-9 because you're not scoring more than 9. So it's we don't need to test Sauce or whoever it is. So I agree.
And you saw everything you needed. I knew we were, in my heart of hearts, 2 years ago, the game in New England, the very last game of the year, when he ran Brees 31 times in the snow coming off a knee injury, and in perfect Jetsdom, they pulled him because they thought he got 1,000 yards, but they added incorrectly.
It's really
Go Jets. That's it.
Exactly. That's Jets football, Dave.
And we lost draft picks and wound up trading our. But
it didn't necessarily feel over then, but I remember, I think it was August going into last year. We were in our conversations, not on the pod, citing that situation. When
there's an outside, aren't we like innies and do you watch Severance? Aren't we like innies and outies that we just pod?
Yes.
We've been asleep for 3 years, but now we're back.
In-person hangs, just live pods.
Yeah.
I mean, it's when he was walking around as the most fired man in America, you read those jokes. He looked it, and it didn't quite make sense until you pieced it all together of just the dead man walking, him and Joe. And it seemed like that the beginning of last season was an epilogue. And the true ending of that story was that Patriots game. And the way they it was so embarrassing.
Well, I can't. Maybe next week when we learn how to get clips into this thing, I'm going to find that Hard Knocks clip. I'm going to edit it together. And he's up there talking. This wasn't his. Maybe it was the Crow comment. And they cut to the team, and they're just looking at him like, this guy's a fucking idiot. And at that point,
talk about the Giants one, which they should, because that sucked. But it's very similar.
And they're just, and you can tell the team is like, what the fuck is this guy? How about an offensive or defensive strategy, Bobby? He's talking about crows and some other nonsense, and the team isn't responding to him. And I said, oh boy, because he sure as hell isn't a wizard with the with the grease pen. So if the players aren't responding to him, that's what happens. And that's what happened.
Yeah, and it felt that way. And with Aaron Glenn,
just bite some ankles, man. Just bite some knees. Just learn from Dan Campbell. And then he worked under Sean Payton, right? He's a
Payton guy, and it's similar. It's a similar feel, and it's people say Parcells. It's not
exactly accurate, that's all I want.
But it's the same vibe, and this leads me to my question for you, which is probably the biggest question of the podcast.
Yeah,
we've talked about 2024 a lot. Where's our head at? Grades of the free agency. Let's just pretend, because I think this exercise is better with some projection. You're happy with the draft. You feel good about it.
Yeah.
Where is your head at imagine a complete roster to some degree. And imagine that things go about neutral the rest of the way. How do you actually feel about the state of the Jets? And really, what I'm asking for is how do you actually feel about Glenn?
I think he was the second best coach out there. I think they got screwed by Vrabel played them, but whatever. He would have been the right coach. They could have hired him last year, but instead they fire Salah 5 weeks in the season.
Just another
Typical
reason to
Jets.
want to beat the Patriots, man.
Yeah, that's a good rivalry. But I'm pretty happy with Aaron. I think he's the right coach. I have over the years kind of gotten away from. I don't know if the coach's offensive or defensive prowess matters as much as the overall strategy of being aggressive. The Jets have not had an aggressive coach since probably Parcells. Now, you could say that Bowles blitzes a lot, but he was not an aggressive coach. These teams are so afraid of losing. It drives me crazy every year. They're 3-10, and there's where the trick plays or the onside kick. They never did anything. They never tried. These teams don't try to win. And I believe Aaron's going to literally here in the press conference. We're going to try to win. We're going to try to push it, and losing by 6 or losing by 3 and saying, "Oh man, the Niners are a good team. That's a tough team." You're not going to hear that from Aaron. So that I'm very excited about. He understands New York. He wanted to be here. My God, if they didn't hire him, I don't know where they would have gone. So I'm enthusiastic, and um, the pervert in me is rooting for a coach who's overwhelmed for 10 or 12 weeks, starts to figure it out a little bit, and the team gets I like the quarterback draft this year, and it's the only way you can win in the NFL. I'm not interested in sneaking into the playoffs with a 9-8 and getting shellacked by Kansas City in round one. We got to get a franchise quarterback. The only real way to do that is to draft. So yeah, I'm rooting for the tank this year. So
I think we're in a similar spot where I'm optimistic and going back to winning the offseason, winning a press conference. The Jets haven't done
yeah,
that since 2010.
yeah,
And that's the thing that people want to talk about lip service. They want to talk about, well, let's see him actually do it. That's just words. The words have been bad. Bobby,
yeah, yeah,
Gase, Bowles,
yeah,
all the GMs since then, Joe especially, whether you like him or not, he did not communicate well.
yeah,
And you can say it's easy, but Glenn, there was a different feeling. He pandered. He mentions 98. He mentions the Denver game. That was awesome.
yeah,
I think all the true fans were excited. But he also, when talking about aggression, when talking about wanting to win, it felt different. It might not amount to anything. But I think where I'm at, I'm happy to actually hang my hat on words and on lip service. That
yeah,
I actually feel good that I can cite something and be like, I agree with that, whether he actually means it. It's like politicians, where it's like you at least want to hear something that
yeah,
makes you feel like they're pretending to care. And it's that same thing where it's he smart enough to know what I want to hear, and that has been missing for so long. And I don't want to tank. I want to lose as many games as possible. The ratio of Glenn and company looking smart, looking forward thinking, that to me is the priority. If we can find a way to win 4 games and Glenn feels like the
yeah.
guy, that would be ideal.
And I think
But
if you
I,
saw
you know,
what the Lions went through, whatever many years ago, where they lost the first 10 and then kind of played were the last 7 or whatever 6, they were a competitive team, and you could kind of see, oh, this team might actually have something. That's what I'm rooting for. Um, and we'll tease this as we wrap up here for next week. Just a philosophy in the draft is what I'm really looking for, which I haven't seen in a while. But I'm relatively confident that the Jets are going to have a philosophy drafting, which I do like the thing about this offseason. I've liked these guys are all young. There's no veteran players on this team. I think the average age um, is 28, one of the youngest teams in the league. And let's just keep that up, and let's have a philosophy, and then we'll kind of talk about that next week about what we think they're going to do in the draft.
yeah, I mean, that's a good place to end where I am optimistic in some ways, and I'm optimistic in the most important way. And that's what is exciting. And before we go, I just want to have we might do some fun stuff. It's not all doom and
This
gloom
wasn't
here.
fun. This wasn't fun.
No, especially
Probably not.
not with you. Favorite players in Jet history. I think it's
Yeah.
fun to reminisce. We don't have
Yeah.
too much to reminisce about, especially
Yeah.
myself being quite a bit younger than you.
Hmm. Actually.
Um, Running backs. It's my favorite
Yeah.
position. I don't
Hmm.
know what your favorite position. It's my favorite position to watch in football. It's always been one I've had
Strange.
extra excitement with. Who's your favorite Jets running back of all time? Your guy.
Hmm. Well, you're not going to believe this, but my actual favorite Jets running back of all time was Blair Thomas.
That's
It
awesome.
was. So
Expand, please expand. Never didn't get to see him live.
Blair Thomas, second pick in the draft, which we passed on Cortez Kennedy and Junior Seau, and yeah, those two guys for sure. Um, and we pass on those guys. We take Blair Thomas, and he has a kind of 1992 or 1990. Then I'm just all Jets all the time. Just the most exciting thing in the world is watching Blair Thomas, and then his second year is having a great year, and then the famous fumble on Monday Night Football that then ended his career. Um, just never rooted for a player harder. Just my favorite guy to see. And then turns out one of my friend's girlfriends had a sexual relationship with Blair Thomas, which
Oh
just
wow.
made it come
How
full
was he?
circle. I think they just kissed, so he's a
Okay.
good kisser apparently. But that really kind of brought it full circle, and which was I'm not kidding was my favorite. I've never rooted for a player harder than Blair Thomas. Pun intended.
Great aura, or as the kids say, he very looks very cool. I've seen some highlights and I've seen some moments when I was like looking back at games. I used to on YouTube they have like old ESPN clips like Chris Berman and Tom
Yeah,
Jackson and like highlights, and it's
yeah.
yeah, it's a shame it didn't work out.
They thought what you're seeing with Saquon is what they thought Blair Thomas was in the '90s, which would have been
Penn
a
State,
huge
right?
deal.
Both Penn
Yeah,
State.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's
And how about
that's fun.
yourself?
Thomas Jones. It's an easy one
Hmm.
for me.
Who is now
Short,
segued to an actor?
yeah, and I
Yeah.
believe he's good. I've yet to see him his work, but I should support him. Yeah, I still rock the Thomas Jones number 20 jersey.
Mm.
08 Thomas Jones is one of my favorite athletes
Yeah.
in history. Love the way he played, and it was really, really, really fun. I don't know if I've rooted for a guy harder in terms of that idea. Football at its essence of we're running the ball, we're running the ball, and
Yeah.
we're going to get the first down. It's never felt so much like a layup as it did with Thomas Jones, especially in 08, 09, and
Yeah. Well,
the
this great
ground and
offensive
pound.
line. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's the I wish he was on 2010. Although I love LaDainian and
Yeah.
when they really pushed for it, because that to me is the height of 09. It's the height of Rex. That first year with the defense and Thomas Jones on the other side with the young Sean Green. Definitely my favorite.
I have two runner-ups. My two runner-ups are
Honorable
Freeman.
mentions. I love it.
Honorable mentions: Freeman McNeil for sure. Now I patented my football game after Freeman McNeil. I had a deadly,
Legendary Barry Levy football game.
deadly. I would kind of juke just like Freeman. From watching Freeman, I go in the backyard and work on my Freeman McNeil jukes, and he actually was a great running back. And the Jets, of course, took him instead of Lawrence Taylor. So way to go. Might have that backwards. I know
I
they were.
prefer Freeman McNeil.
Yeah, was a great running back, different era. And then the other guy who you mentioned, Sean Green, for a year was
Awesome.
just the most exciting player in the NFL. And
He's
then he
in
came back.
the 2011 year from hell, the 8-8 eventual year,
Yeah,
ending with the captain.
because they thought
Captain
it
patch
was
year.
time. It was time for him to get, and then he just stopped. I don't know what it was, if he just stopped running hard or was trying to. But man, he was exciting. He could just run a guy over, and then once he'd run you over, away he went. So he was another real guy who I really loved watching
The
him
Rex
play.
era was really over in 2011, even though there was signs of life in 2013. And when I think of 2011, still my least favorite year as a Jets fan, by far, because I really truly believed into 2010 and when they were
Yeah,
8-5. I think of three things. I think of the captain's patch debacle that was the leadership
yeah,
on that team. I think of Aaron Maben because of the
yeah,
weird, like,
yeah,
is he the best player in the league? Is he the
yeah.
worst player in the league?
We
And
have
I
Aaron
think of
Maben
Sean.
2.0, by the way.
Yeah, we do. WMD, Big Willie style. And Sean Green being like, wow,
Yeah,
Tomlinson is done, but
yeah.
Sean Green is amazing.
Yeah,
Ring that bell,
and
baby.
yeah, I
Like,
was
so cool.
rigging that bell. Let's get Sean Green. Let's feed him more, and we did. And then he just he
I don't want to
regurgitated.
body shame. I feel like he gained like 6 extra pounds in 2012
Yeah.
and it was over. Like he was on this fine line of like
Another
being
honorable
too
mention
slight.
guy who reminds me of Sean Green, which you may be a little young, Leon Johnson, who Bill Parcells deemed the natural, was also a really great running back who just kind of made some plays. Yeah, there's a lot of good running backs for the Jets.
Yeah, Bilal Powell needs to be talked about
Wow.
too, even for just a second. I mean, my favorite, that Fitzpatrick year, the 2015 year, which was a
That is
debacle.
your perversion. That is
That's
your
my version. But
that's your peak perversion. That
that
was
Giants game where they came back and they won, I believe, in overtime. It was an outlet pass to Powell, and that was like one of my favorite Jet memories, especially
Powell and
catching the ball.
Kotri are like the same player.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Speaking of
they're just.
Kotchery as an ending point, next week's gonna be receiver, and you're gonna lead it off. So
Oh, I know. I can.
save it for next week.
I'll have a visual for that.
Thank you for listening to the Yards. There are going to be some Mets stuff this week coming up. The Mets are going to have their first homestand, and we're going to hit up with some more Jets content as well if there's any news. Barry, you got anything?
Nope.
Perfect. Always the loquacious type. Thank you for listening.
All right. God bless.